All right, so I know there was a little confusion out there. We decided to have a little fun, and with Anatomy of a Breach, we actually hacked the app and switched rooms on everybody. So if you were expecting to be in the AR, VR session, this is not it. It's the security session. Just make sure everybody's in the right place. All right. So we have a great speaker for you guys today. Working off the backs of yesterday, everyone is in security now. Apparently, the people in the other room didn't get that message, didn't quite understand it. But wanted to build off of that great overview that George gave on what's going on, and then dig a little deeper under the hood to figure out, at a more detailed level, what things are actually happening. How does it change the way you think, and then how do we need to approach solving those problems? Whereas, approaching it at a high level, now we're digging more into thinking and how we can move this stuff forward. So we have a great speaker for you guys today. I'll let Dimitri introduce himself when he gets up. Dimitri McKay from Splunk, who's basically their chief evangelist on the security architecture side, is going to be treating you guys to an amazing talk today. So let's have a hand for Dimitri and have him come up.
Thank you, sir. Nothing like lowering expectations, right? Jesus Christ, now I have to live up to that. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm coming in after lunch, aren't I? Yeah, well, I'm sure the lunch was heavy. So thank you all for coming to the Anatomy of a Breach talk, and I will be your host for the next probably 38 minutes. The slide deck I put together for you guys is probably a little different than some of them that you've seen. I'm not a fan of the marketing style of most decks. Of course, I'm also a crazy person, so I just want you to put that in your back pocket through the talk. But I'll jump right in. My background, I've been in security forever. My background has always been security. It turns out I'm much better at breaking things than fixing them, so I was not ripe for IT. I was a pen tester, so I broke things for a living, and I think that gave me an interesting perspective on security. And you probably shouldn't ever take anything seriously that I say. I'm going to go through some scary metrics, and they're based on the latest Verizon breach report, as well as the latest Ponemon study, which was done also by IBM. So I went to the latest and greatest of metrics for you guys so that everything that I talk about is going to be completely relevant as soon as Wednesday. And then we'll talk about sort of the costs around breaches, how they happen, et cetera. So let's jump right in. So I want to define the nomenclature first. I often hear them used interchangeably, but they're not. An incident means something did happen. A breach means something did happen and something was stolen. Now, as a pen tester, I've got lots of funny stories, but I will save you the time and effort of listening to me drag on. But I want to talk about how breaches really happen. Now, you hear about the theoreticals in the news all the time, and you certainly see them in movies, but the reality is breaches don't really happen the way that they're advertised. Most of the time, if we look at the metrics, they happen with spear phishing. You receive an email, maybe from a Nigerian prince. Could happen. Maybe it claims to be your bank. Maybe it claims to be a relative. Maybe it claims to be an organization you trust. And you click on it. Or you open the attachment, which is often the malware. And what happens is when that malware kicks off, whether you've downloaded it or it came in your email, that process kicks off another process that then communicates out and does a couple things. Either it reaches out and it creates a direct pipeline for the bad guy to get into the network, or that malware steals your password, or that malware encrypts your machine. But all of them communicate out at some point. That's how breaches really happen. If you look across the majority of them, that's how breaches start. They start with humans. They start with our trust. Let's talk about security today. I'm going to move through these quickly. These are stats about what's happened in the last year, according to the Verizon Breach Report. So external threats, these are usually nation states or they're just crooks that do these breaches. This is a big spike in internal threat. Usually I sort of dismiss internal threat. It's not a big thing, but we actually saw a big increase over the last year of people probably saying, well, the crooks have all the fun. Let me do something too to get some extra money. Where's the money? Healthcare, they're looking for the PII. We saw a lot of that last year. Right? What's terrifying, speaking to that last slide, what's terrifying about the rules that the healthcare organizations have to disclose a breach is it's so gray. I'll give you an example. Hackers can have my first initial, last name, parents' maiden names, first car, name of my pet, social security number, date of birth, name of all of my relatives, and healthcare companies don't have to acknowledge that a breach took place. They are not responsible because the hackers don't have my full first name. It's terrifying, isn't it? But that PII is what's being stolen. Retail and accommodation being the hotel business. What they are being hit with often is the cards that you use, not just the gift cards, but also the cards that we all use to accommodate, to get points, right? Our Marriott points, Hilton points. Hackers are stealing those and then cashing those out to Amex gift cards and a number of other things. So they got hit pretty hard last year. And then, of course, public sector, and that's usually espionage-based. But I want to make it clear that I'm talking about a specific group of verticals, but they are not the only ones. No one was immune. Everyone was hit. Phishing is grossly successful. I'll give you some metrics on that. 30% are open. So if I've got an organization of 100 people, 30 of my people are going to open that email. Now 15% might be hit once, right? And that might be opening the actual file attachment. But this is where things got a little wacky for me. I said, wow, tricked multiple times. I've got a company of 100 people. 3% of those are clicking. Okay. Have we not learned anything yet? %. Recognize that it's probably a fish and send it off. So here's the reality is it only takes one. We don't have to worry about 10%, 20%, 100%. We have to worry about one person opening. That's all it takes. Made this on the flight over last night. So we often think of security as being the CISO's problem, don't we? CISO's up all night. Doesn't matter how successful your business is. If you're grossly successful, CEO is like, CFO is like, Chief Operating Officer, and the CISO's flipping out. He's like, I got to make sure that we continue this path. More on that. Let's talk about the cost of a breach. So because we were talking about ransomware, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I reached out to a friend of mine who just wrote this piece about the true cost of ransomware. And I'm going to use an example that we've all heard about in the news, which was Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital. Now, they paid $17,000 for their ransomware outbreak. And if we break down the math, most people just go, it's 17 grand. But that 17 grand was decided by the hackers. They decided 17 grand. But if they said, how about we go with, I don't know, 170 grand? Would they have paid it? What if they said, you know what? 1.7 million, that's what we want. Would they have paid it? I think probably. They were down for 4 days. And if we break that down, $7,900 per minute. Jesus. So the overall cost of that breach in lost revenue, in attrition, came up to about 550 grand. It's a hell of a lot more than 17K in Bitcoin. That's more than security's problem at that point, right? Now our CISO, he's not alone. Right? Our CIO's out there too going, oh, Jesus, because it's his infrastructure that this is happening on. Let's talk about data records. I give you an example of a data record, first initial, last name, blah, blah, blah. These are the real numbers. 7 million average cost per breach. That's up from 5, I want to say a year and a half ago. So per record, this is what it costs companies per record. This is what they're being hit with as far as the fines, as far as the remediation, the PR, the legal, the lawsuits. And here's the breakdown. Now, most breaches, the big payout that insurance companies kick out is for legal and investigation, right? The actual breach investigation. Those are the two top tier. But if you're a big company and you already have legal, you already have an internal team to do the investigation, your costs aren't nearly as high. So the truth is that the challenge that companies continue to have is around justification of security spend. So when we look at 7 million in losses, guess who else is up at night? It's our friend the CFO. This is what we're up against. Happens all the time. Look in the news, right? It's a breach every day. We're numb to it at this point. Why does it keep happening? Here's why. The bad guys have way more money to throw at breaking in than people have budgets to defend against it. Traditionally, the CISO was an IT person who kind of came up the ranks. But we're seeing a change. We're seeing a CISO now as more of a business professional. So we're seeing that, which is good because it helps justify, they help justify based on their skill set, what things cost, what's value, what threat cost, what's risk cost. But it starts with having the team, having the right team. It starts with the Security Operations Center. And that's not as common as you think. And even if they do have a Security Operations Center, I see a whole lot of immature security programs. And I'll talk more about insecurity as we move forward. A lot of Security Operations Centers I see, it's theater. Oh, it's theater. They have screens all over the walls. They're measuring based on alerts closed. Not accuracy, just the number of alerts that have been closed. Is that the proper metric to be tracking? I can close tickets all day, but if there's actually a breach that's taking place, I'm not measuring that. And security is completely manual at this point. That's a huge challenge. Now, I often talk about unemployment rates for security. Forbes did an article a year and a half ago and said, I want to say it was a couple 100,000 open jobs with no one to fill them. I've been trying to get my cousin to get into security, and he's just not the brightest bulb in the box. But hey, there's jobs, right? Train him to push a button. Purely manual at this point. So, and the numbers, if we look, those numbers of open jobs are going to be in the millions by 2020. We have to be smarter about how we're doing this moving forward. Because here's the reality. Security analysts, we've got our tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Doesn't matter the tier, here's the average. It takes about 25 minutes per ticket. Okay. There's no context there, right? It means they can close 14 to 28 cases. Okay. Is that good or bad? Here's the reality. Neiman Marcus had nearly 69,000 unchecked alerts. We've got an analyst that can do 28 in a day. How could we possibly separate the real breaches from that? Right? What's actually important? 4% of overall alerts are investigated. And we're still basing that on security theater. So, how can we fix this? We have to get back to basics. I've been in the SIEM world, SIEM, SEIM, SEM, SIM. All means the same thing. It's security, investigation, event management, or security, event, you get the idea. It's about taking data and being able to sift through that for monitoring purposes, alerting purposes, reporting purposes. And most of those tools are not built on industry best practices. They're not built on controls, specific controls. Some of them have compliance mandates backing them. But most compliance mandates are actually the lowest common denominator. So we have to get back to basics. In security, we talk about three-legged stool. It's people, it's process, and it's technology. But as someone who meets a whole lot of customers, let me tell you how this actually goes. We've got a new company that come up, and it's time to start thinking about security. So they think they can fix security with a lot of products. So they buy all kinds of stuff. Best, the greatest products out there, buy them. And they go, Christ, we've got all these products. Now we need people to actually manage them. So they hire a bunch of people. And they go, you know, we've got all these people and all these products. We need to actually put some process around this. And that's when the organization, that's when the security program becomes much more mature. And that just continues to rotate. But that's how things usually start. Obviously, you need the technologies, but you need the people. This is my all-time favorite slide in any deck. And I have a laser that I can use. And this is, I can take out people's retinas with this thing. This is serious business. So when we talk about security, when I talk about immature corporations and their security program, right here, that's where most people are kind of living. They might have some visibility, and they might be able to see some authorized, unauthorized activity, and maybe they do some triage. That's where people are living. But they usually don't have visibility across their entire inventory. Right? They don't know what's out there in their network. They don't have the tools for it. Right here, they actually don't know who's targeting them. And even if they do, they don't have a way of really measuring whether or not they are being attacked. I think of this as being having the ability to understand user behavior and deviations from that. Let's go back to that. Wrong laser. All right. Hunting is a concept that sounds really cool, and unfortunately it's really rare. And what hunting is we've got a group of people who spend their day looking to see, is there weirdness going on in the environment? Are there threats? And they're usually the top of the stack. These are the tough guys that are in the Security Operations Center. Now, they might not look like tough guys, but they're intellectual tough guys. But this is very uncommon. The biggest companies have hunters. Most companies don't. They're not mature enough for it yet. And then the ability to act. And I'll talk more about that in a couple slides. So what I tell folks is, listen, look at your infrastructure based on that previous slide. Know where you're living, and then start to fill in the gaps to satiate that. If you can fill that whole pyramid, your security program is very, very mature. past, folks defined a security program based on what was important to the IT department. But how did that help the businesses themselves? What we're seeing is people focusing more on the business, what's important to the business, what keeps the business moving. One of the reasons breaches happen is because data that's worth stealing lives in either a file share or a database. As a former pen tester, I could tell you horror stories about how the least thing protected in the candy store was the candy. Start with what's important, work backward from there, important to the business. The way I usually describe this is, at home, what's more important? Your wife's jewelry or your dog's toys? What do you put in the safe?
Dog's toys.
Yes. And my dog would agree. Start with what's important, work backward from there. But how can we move from a purely manual process to taking on these massive threats? Well, we have to work smarter, not harder. And I know how cliche that sounds. I think that was my first computer. Computer. We talk about machine learning a lot in the industry. And the challenge with machine learning is that it's continuing to develop as a concept and also in implementation. I'll be honest, as a security guy, I wrote it off as hogwash. Machine learning. No, really, I did. And then I actually got to look at some of the tools and the output that came from them. And I said, wow, this isn't just finding one event that says, hey, something's taking place. Something always takes place. Someone is always going to come in late. Someone is always going to download more than usual. Someone is always going to try to access a server or something or use credit. There's always going to be extremes on either end. But does that make them actually a threat? Maybe. But the only way we can tell is if we say, okay, across this timeline, does this define this as a threat? Came in early, who cares? Downloaded more than usual, who cares? Went to websites for looking for a new job, now we might be onto something. I could tell you it's raining, and maybe you believe me, maybe you don't. But if I say it's raining, and this handsome gentleman says it's raining, and that handsome gentleman is wearing wellies and carrying a wet umbrella, you look outside and it's dark, you believe it's raining. And that's the same concept that machine learning is about. It's taking all of these different events and tying them together. And what this is going to do is this is going to help us augment not only the staff challenges that we have. Remember, 0% unemployment rate in security. So we have to augment that with a smarter machine. And with machine learning, we can augment that. And the way that we've done it in the past is using what we call correlation. But we need a smarter version of that. Machine learning is going to give us that. This is how I usually describe to people the concept of automation in our space, the security space. I put my hands like this. And they're not looking at this slide because they haven't seen anything like this yet, but I go like this. And I say, this is what it means when you start to adopt automation. I stop. And they look at me like I'm a crazy person. And they're not wrong. But that's the hand position you have when you first drive a Tesla. You're terrified, right? And 15 minutes in, you're like, okay, well, this is, I don't see any white trucks, so doing okay so far. 40 minutes after that, you're kind of down here, and within an hour, you're playing Nintendo Go or whatever the kids are playing these days. But you have to adopt it. Now, what I often hear from folks when I start talking about automation and security is, no, but that can be used against us. That's true. Could. But if we look at the number of breaches because of human error, I'll take the automation all day. Because IT has been using automation for years, and they've proven the value of automation. Now, when I talk about automation and security, there's really three directions we can go with that. So in some places, automation essentially means adding more context. You see a human standing up here. I'm a man. But maybe you look at my personal information, and my name is Dimitri. My middle name is John. My mother's name is Janet. My father's name is Ronald. Now, there's information about me. I live in New York City. Information about me. You're adding context to this person. When you all log into your computers at work, you're not just a username. There's a lot more information behind it about you. Now, that's step one in automation. Step two is information gathering, evidence gathering. So every breach that's being investigated starts the exact same way for the first 15 minutes. The investigator has to get the data. They go running off in all these directions to get that data. But we can automate that. We can reach out and grab that data from the endpoint, from wherever that user's logged in. We can find out all the other information and put it in one place. That's step two of automation, is making investigations faster. Step three is my favorite. Step three is blocking and tackling. You're probably wondering what I'm talking about. If we know that 4% of alerts are investigated, it means there's a whole lot that are not. And the number is about 17,000 per business of alerts every week received. 4% of those are being investigated. And that's a really crappy job if your job is to sift through that. So with automation, we can start to really be proactive. We've got this list we call threat lists. And the FBI gives us one, or other verticals might have a threat list, or maybe there's a commercial company that sells threat intel, and that threat intel, that threat data, is basically a list of all the bad guys that are out there. Great to know. But how do you put that into practice? How do you leverage that? Kaiser Permanente did a talk 2 years ago at Splunk Conf. That's our big conference. And they had taken all of this, they'd taken these lists of bad guys. They took that and they automated a process to keep those employees from ever meeting the bad guys. Blocked all the URLs, blocked the IP addresses, blocked any chance that the employees had to go to that place. And something magical happened. They were able to cut their alerts down over 90%. 90%. So now they could focus on the things that were important, the things that were actually a threat to the business. They could now focus, because they weren't chasing 69,000 alerts like Neiman Marcus, with analysts that can only do at max 28 alerts per day. And that's why blocking and tackling is so valuable. We have to automate. We have to take that intelligence from machine learning that tells me that it's raining, not because someone said so, but because lots of things told me it's raining. We have to take those alerts. We have to take action automated on that. I don't want a queue of alerts at the end of the day that haven't been checked. I want a report that says all the awesomeness that took place within my environment. Because I promise you this, as a pen tester, you don't want me in your environment for 24 hours. You don't. I can cause some real damage. Me and everyone else that's in the pen testing world. So if it has to live in a queue, we're already too late. We're going to stop breaches. Smarter, not harder. Now, when we talk about threat data, it's not as well accepted by most companies as it should. And I know that not all of you are security people, but I want you guys to be comfortable with the idea of there is intelligence out there. Traditionally in security, we were a fishbowl. We were masters of our domain. We could see as far as that glass wall in our SOC. But that's all we had visibility of. And threat data gives us the ability to leverage what other people do really well, which is find out where all the bad guys are and let us know. That's a great picture. Okay, so I want to recap. The things we talked about are the state of the union in security. It's dire. And it's dire because we're still holding on to these legacy ways of doing security. And we're lacking budget to do more. And we're lacking talent that we can bring on to help us focus on the right things, to eliminate that noise. But there are options out there. There are technologies out there that can help us act smarter and not work so hard. And then once you've got all your ducks in a row, now you can take on the bad guys. You can be real proactive when it comes to taking down the bad guys. So what I want to leave you with is that security is everyone's responsibility. It's not just the security team anymore. Now it's everyone's responsibility. And your call to action, anybody know who that is? John Wick. I love you guys. My last big conference I did a talk at, I wore that outfit. And I used that slide. I got to the end and just stood there. The call to action is simply this. Start to ask questions. And start to think about how you, in your role, in your organization, how you can help with furthering security, increasing the maturity of your security program. It might not be direct. It might be as simple as not clicking on the link that claims to be an African prince. But every little bit helps. And with that, we're all in this together. Thank you very much for coming out.